She has no one, no name, no family. The note says no one's child. So what are you going to do, Ryan? He looked down at the baby in his arms, blue-lipped, barely breathing. Her tiny fingers curled around his calloused thumb, like she already knew he was the only one left. She's mine now, he said. That's what I'm going to do. If you've ever been left behind by the people who were supposed to love you most, this story is for you. Subscribe to the channel, follow this story all the way to the end, and drop a comment telling me what city you are watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The snow had been falling for 3 hours by the time Ryan Carter's motorcycle died on the edge of Maplewood Park. Not a sputter, not a warning, just silence. He kicked the stand down, sat back on the frozen seat, and let out a long breath that turned to fog in the dark Colorado air. He was 41 years old alone and stranded on a back road in a town he didn't know the name of. That wasn't unusual. That was Tuesday. Ryan had spent the better part of 2 decades being exactly where he didn't belong. He pulled off his helmet and ran a hand through his graying hair. The wind cut through his leather jacket like it had something personal against him. His phone showed 1 bar of signal and a battery at 11%. He had no roadside assistance, no local contacts, and no patience for self-pity. He had, however, one option: walk. He slung his saddlebag over one shoulder and started across the park. It was the shortcut he could see the glow of a gas station sign through the tree line, maybe a quarter-mile east. If he kept moving, he'd make it in 10 minutes. Maybe find someone who knew a mechanic. Maybe not. Either way, standing still wasn't in Ryan Carter's nature. He was halfway through the park when he heard it. He stopped walking. At first, he thought it was the wind. Colorado wind does things at night, whistles through the pines in pitches that sound almost human. He'd heard it before. He kept moving. Then he heard it again. Higher, sharper, desperate. He turned. Off the main path, maybe 20 feet into the snow, there was a bench, a park bench, and on that bench was something that shouldn't have been there. Something small, something wrapped in a blanket the color of old bone. Ryan stood very still for a moment. His brain told him it was nothing. An animal, a trick of the cold and the dark. His brain was very good at protecting him from things that were going to cost him something. But his feet were already moving. He reached the bench in 8 strides and looked down. A baby. A real living, breathing baby girl, maybe 3 months old, maybe less, lying in a dip between the wooden slats where the snow had gathered around her like a cradle that didn't care if she lived or died. Her face was the color of pale wax. Her lips had gone bluish at the edges. But she was crying softly now, weakly, and that sound, that tiny, exhausted sound, hit Ryan Carter somewhere behind his ribs that he hadn't felt in a long time. He didn't think. He reached down and picked her up. She was light in a way that scared him. Not just small hollow, like she'd already used up everything she had just trying to survive the night. He pressed her against his chest, instinctively pulling his jacket around her. And she went still for a moment, startled maybe, and then made a sound he couldn't quite name. Not quite crying, not quite peace, something in between. "Okay," he said to no one in particular. "Okay, I've got you." That was the first promise Ryan Carter made to her. He looked around the bench. No stroller, no diaper bag, no sign of anyone who'd been there recently. Then he saw the note. It had been tucked underneath her, under the edge of the blanket, folded once weighted down by a small, smooth river rock, like someone had been thoughtful about the wind. Ryan unfolded it with one hand, the baby pressed against his chest with the other. 4 words, written in ballpoint pen in handwriting that was careful and deliberate, the kind of handwriting that takes time. Not the scrawl of someone in a panic. No one's child, that was all. No name, no date, no phone number, no apology, no goodbye. No one's child. Ryan read it twice. He read it a 3rd time. Then he folded it back up and put it in his jacket pocket and started walking, not toward the gas station anymore, but back the way he came, toward the road and toward the town, toward the nearest building with the magnets on. His phone was down to 7%. He dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? "I found a baby," Ryan said. "In a park, Maplewood Park. I think I don't know the exact address. She's alive, but she's cold. She needs help. Sir, can you tell me the condition of the infant? She's breathing. She was crying a minute ago. She's stopped now. That worries me." "Okay, stay calm. Can you keep her warm? I'm doing it. I've got her against my chest. My jacket's around her. Just send somebody fast. Units are on the way. Can you stay on the line? Yes. What is your name, sir? He hesitated, just for a second. Ryan Carter. Are you the child's father? He looked down at the baby. She had stopped crying completely now. Her eyes were closed. He couldn't tell if that was worse or better. No, he said. I'm nobody to her. I just found her. The ambulance came in 6 minutes. The paramedics moved fast, professional, and Ryan stepped back without being asked. He understood hierarchy. He understood when to get out of the way. But when the young female paramedic reached to take the baby from his arms, something happened that he didn't expect. The baby woke up. Her eyes opened dark, unfocused, the eyes of someone who hasn't yet learned what the world is, and for just a moment she looked directly at Ryan. Not at the paramedic, not at the lights, at him. And then the paramedic had her, and Ryan's arms were empty, and the cold came back into the space where she had been. Sir, we need you to come with us to give a statement, a police officer said from somewhere to his left. Young guy, sharp-looking, notebook already open. Fine, Ryan said. You found her on the bench. Yes. What were you doing in the park at this hour? My motorcycle broke down. I was cutting through. Do you live in Maplewood? No. Where do you live? Ryan looked at him. Wherever I stop. The officer wrote something down. He had the careful expression of someone who had already decided something about the man in front of him. We're going to need more information, Mr. Carter. If you'll come to the station. Will she be okay? Ryan asked. He wasn't looking at the officer. He was watching the back of the ambulance. The paramedics are with her now. That's not what I asked. A pause. We don't know yet, the officer said with slightly more honesty than Ryan had expected. They'll take her to County General. She'll be evaluated. Okay, Ryan said. He watched the ambulance pull away. The red lights washed over the snow and then disappeared around the corner. Let's go to your station. Sure. The police station was small and overlit and smelled like old coffee and industrial cleaner. Ryan sat across from a detective named Lori Mays, mid-50s, short gray hair, eyes that had seen everything and were still paying attention. She reminded him faintly and painfully of someone he used to know. Tell me again how you found her, she said. He told her again, exactly the same way he told it the first time because it was the truth and the truth doesn't need practicing. You didn't see anyone near the bench. No. No car pulling away, no one on foot. No. She looked at him steadily. You're a biker. I was. I'm not active with any club. But you were. Years ago, I left. Why was Ryan folded his hands on the table. Because I grew up, he said simply. Mays studied him for another few seconds, then something in her posture shifted, not soft exactly, but less rigid. She put down her pen. The note you found. You said you kept it. He reached into his jacket and placed it on the table. She unfolded it with gloved hands, read. It didn't react except for the smallest tightening around her eyes. No one's child, she said quietly, almost to herself. Yeah, that kind of note, she paused. It's not written in anger, it's not frantic. Someone sat down and thought about those words. I know. That bothers you. Ryan looked at the table. Somebody planned to leave her there, in the cold, at night, in the snow, and they had time to think about the wording. He looked up. Yeah, it bothers me. They let him go at 2 a.m. with a warning to stay in the county. He walked back to his motorcycle in the dark, pushing it the last quarter mile to a garage that opened at 7. He waited on a wooden bench outside the garage door, with his saddlebag as a pillow, sleeping in the 40-minute intervals, waking each time to the same thought. She had looked at him. Right at him. In the dark, in the snow half frozen, she had opened her eyes and looked directly at him. He was not a man who believed in signs. He was not, if he was honest, a man who believed in much of anything. He had spent 20 years systematically dismantling every belief he had ever had, and he had done a thorough job of it. But that baby had looked at him. At 7:15, the garage opened. He paid cash for the repair, a cracked fuel line, nothing serious, and was back on his bike by 9. He told himself he was heading south. He had no reason to stay in this town. He had no reason to do anything except move, which was what he always did. He drove 3 blocks and turned around. He went to County General. The nurse at the intake desk was named Sharon, according to her badge, and she had the specific energy of someone who had answered the same question 5,000 times. "I'm looking for information about a baby," Ryan said. "Infant female brought in last night, found in Maplewood Park." Sharon looked up. "Are you family?" "No, Smayan. I'm sorry, sir. We can't release information to—" "I found her," he said. "I'm the one who called 911. I just want to know if she's okay." A pause. Sharon looked at him in the way that people look at you when they're deciding whether you're a problem or a person. "She's stable," she said finally, quietly, leaning forward just slightly. "She was treated for hypothermia. She's going to be okay." Ryan let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding for 8 hours. "Good," he said. "That's good." He turned to go. "Sir," he stopped. "Social services is involved. She'll go into temporary foster care while they investigate. If you want to," Sharon hesitated like she was choosing words carefully. "If you wanted to stay local, make yourself known to the caseworker. It sometimes matters. Who found them? The story." He looked back at her. "Why are you telling me that?" Sharon glanced down at the desk, then back up. "Because you came back," she said simply. "Most people don't." He didn't leave Maplewood. He got a room at the Ridgeline Motel, $42 a night cash, and he stayed. He didn't fully understand why. He told himself it was practical, the roads south were icy. He told himself he needed a few days off the bike anyway. He told himself a lot of things that weren't quite lies, but weren't quite the truth either. The truth was simpler and more frightening than any excuse he could build. She had looked at him, and something inside him, something he'd kept buried under 20 years of motion and noise and deliberate loneliness, had looked back. He called Detective Mays the next morning. "This is Ryan Carter. You told me to stay in the county." "I remember you, Mr. Carter. I want to be involved with the baby, the case. Whatever the process is, I want to be part of it." A long pause. "That's not a simple thing," Mays said carefully. "You understand there's a formal process, a background check, home study. You don't have a permanent address," you said. "I'll get one." Another pause. Longer this time. "Why?" she asked, and it wasn't skeptical. It was genuine. Ryan looked at the ceiling of the motel room. Cracked plaster, a water stain in the corner, the sound of a heating unit working too hard. "Because she has no one," he said. "And I know what that feels like." 3 days later, he was sitting in a plastic chair in the Department of Family Services, filling out forms he didn't fully understand with a pen that kept skipping. The caseworker across from him was a man named Gerald, younger than Ryan by a decade, with the harried look of someone managing twice as many cases as was reasonable. "Mr. Carter, our concern is stability," Gerald said, flipping through Ryan's folder. "You have no fixed address. Your employment history shows long gaps. You have he paused, a history of association with a motorcycle club that has a federal file." "I left that club 18 years ago," Ryan said. "I've had no criminal charges. Not one. Check the record." "I have checked the record," Gerald said. "That's true. But the standard for foster placement—" "I'm not asking for placement yet," Ryan said carefully. He'd done his homework. 3 nights at the motel, a library card, and the internet had given him enough to know how to talk in this room. "I'm asking to be flagged as an interested party, as the finder. I want to be notified of proceedings." Gerald looked at him. "You understand that even if we agreed to that, the biological parent, if identified, has prior claim." "I understand." "And if no biological parent is identified, the state will pursue formal adoption channels and a single male applicant with your background." "I understand the odds," Ryan said quietly. "I'm not asking for odds. I'm asking for a chance." Something shifted in Gerald's expression, just slightly. "Leave me your contact information," he said. "I'll make a note." That night, sitting in the parking lot of the motel with his jacket on and the engine off, Ryan called the only person he could think to call. He got voicemail. "Hey, it's me. I know we haven't talked in a while. I know that's my fault." He stopped, started again. "I found something, Deb. Somebody, I mean. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if I can do this, but I think I'm supposed to. I don't know how else to explain it." He sat in the silence for a moment. She looked at me, he said, right at me, and I couldn't walk away. He ended the call and sat for a long time in the dark. 3 days into the most important decision he had ever made, Ryan Carter had no money to speak of, no home, no experience with children, and no earthly reason to believe this would end anyway but badly. He also had $42 left until he could find work, a cracked fuel line recently repaired, and a folded note in his jacket pocket that read, "No one's child," a note that he had quietly, privately already decided was wrong. He just didn't know yet how personal the fight was about to become. He didn't know yet that the little girl on the bench, the one with the dark eyes and the paper-thin blanket, the one who had looked at him like he was the only solid thing in the world, had a last name. And it was the same as his. The call came at 6:47 in the morning, 4 days after Ryan had checked into the Ridgeline Motel, and 3 days after he'd told himself he was leaving. He wasn't leaving. He picked up on the first ring. "Mr. Carter?" It was Detective Mays. Her voice had a different quality than it had in the station, tighter, like she was holding something in place while she spoke. "I need you to come in, this morning if possible." "What happened is the baby there. The baby's fine. She's still at County General. They're keeping her for observation through the end of the week." A pause. "This is about something else. Can you come in at 9? "I can come in right now." Another pause. Shorter this time. "9 is fine," she said and hung up. Ryan sat on the edge of the motel bed and looked at the wall. He had learned over 41 years to read the silences in people's voices the way some men read weather. Mays wasn't calling because the case had gone cold. She was calling because something had opened up. Something that required him in a room in person where she could watch his face. That meant one of two things. Either he was a suspect, or the baby was connected to something she thought he needed to know about. He showered, dressed, and was in the parking lot by 7:15. He drove slow loops around the county roads for 90 minutes because he had nowhere else to be, and sitting still had never been something he was good at. At 9 o'clock exactly, he walked through the door of the Maplewood Police Department. Mays was already in the interview room. Coffee on the table, 2 cups. She gestured to the chair across from her without preamble, and Ryan sat. He noticed she had a manila folder on the table in front of her, but her hand was resting on top of it, flat like a door she wasn't ready to open yet. "We ran the note," she said, "the handwriting, the paper routine processing, and we pulled footage from the park entrance. There's a camera on the east gate. Old, not great quality, but functional. And we got a partial plate. A black Range Rover, Colorado registration, entered the park at 11:14 p.m. and exited at 11:41, 27 minutes. She looked at him steadily. "Long enough." Ryan's jaw tightened. "You have a name." "We have a registered owner." Mays still hadn't moved her hand from the folder. "Before I show you this, I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to answer me the same way." "Go ahead." "Do you have any family in Colorado?" The question landed differently than he expected. Not like a routine inquiry, like something with weight behind it dropped carefully. "I had a sister," Ryan said. "She died 14 months ago, car accident. She lived in Denver." May's expression didn't change, but her hand moved off the folder. "What was her name?" "Sarah. Sarah Carter." He stopped. Something cold had started at the base of his spine. "Why, Pajay?" Mays opened the folder. She turned a single sheet of paper around and slid it across the table toward him. It was a birth record. Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. Date of birth 7 weeks ago. A baby girl. The mother's name was listed as Sarah Marie Carter. Ryan stared at the paper for a long time without speaking. The cold thing moved up his spine and into his chest and sat there heavy and final. "She was pregnant," he said. It wasn't a question. It was him hearing himself say it out loud for the first time, understanding something that hadn't been available to him before. "You didn't know." "We weren't." He stopped, pressed his hand flat on the table, started again. "Sarah and I weren't close the last couple years. My fault. We had a falling out. I kept meaning to fix it." His voice was level and completely controlled, which was the most dangerous thing about it. "I kept meaning to and I didn't." "I'm sorry," Mays said, and she meant it. "The father, the Range Rover. Who is it?" Mays pulled another sheet from the folder. She didn't turn it around yet. Ryan, I need you to understand that what I'm about to tell you changes this situation significantly, for the investigation and for you personally. I need you to hold it together in this room. He looked at her. Show me. She turned the paper around. The registered owner of the black Range Rover was a man named Marcus Hale, 38 years old, Denver address, director of operations at a private equity firm called Hale Brennan Capital Group. His photograph was attached to a corporate headshot, the kind that cost more than Ryan made in a month. Dark hair, clean jaw, eyes that knew how to look trustworthy for a camera. Ryan picked up the photograph. He looked at it for 6 seconds. Then he set it down very carefully. He knew about the baby, Ryan said. We believe so. The birth record lists no father, but we found a text chain on Sarah's phone records. We accessed them as part of the investigation. Marcus Hale's number, beginning 7 months ago. Maze's voice was even and professional, but there was something underneath it. Anger controlled the same way Ryan was controlling his. He knew she was pregnant. The texts indicate he pressured her to end the pregnancy. She refused. Ryan said nothing. 3 weeks before Sarah's accident, he stopped responding to her messages entirely. She sent 14 unanswered texts in the final week before she died. Maze paused. We don't have evidence connecting Hale to the accident. It was ruled accidental black ice single vehicle. But the timing is Ryan repeated quietly, is something we're looking at. She said it carefully, like each word had to pass inspection before she let it out. What we do have evidence of is abandonment. The plate, the park footage, and now the birth record. The baby's name, according to the hospital records when she was admitted, is listed as Baby Doe Carter. But we believe her legal name, as given on the original birth record filed before Sarah's death, is Lily Carter. Lily, Ryan said the name once silently, just moving his lips. She's your niece, Maze said, biologically, which means you have standing in this case that you didn't have 4 days ago. Ryan stood up, not abruptly, deliberately. He pushed back his chair, stood up straight, and put both hands in his jacket pockets. He stood like that for a moment, looking at nothing. I want to see her, he said. You can go to the hospital. I'll call ahead. Let them know you're coming. As a documented biological relative, you have the right to... I want to see him, Ryan said, and his voice was very quiet. I want to see Marcus Hale. Ryan! Maze's voice shifted into something firm and careful. Listen to me, if you go near Marcus Hale right now, you will end any chance you have with Lily. Do you understand me? He has lawyers. He has resources. If you show up at his door as a Hell's Angel with a history, Ryan said, it doesn't matter how you say it. It matters how he says it, and he will say it in front of a judge. She leaned forward. If you want that little girl, the only weapon you have right now is doing everything exactly right. The courts, the caseworker, the process. Everything by the book, every single thing. She paused. Can you do that? Ryan looked at her. His hands still in his pockets were closed into fists she couldn't see. I can do that, he said. He didn't sound entirely convinced, but he turned and walked toward the door. And he didn't turn south when he left the building. He turned toward County General. And that was, for right now, enough. The hospital let him in without argument this time. A nurse named Patricia, older kind, the sort of woman who had been doing this long enough to understand what mattered and what didn't, led him through a side corridor to a room in the pediatric wing. She paused outside the door. She's doing much better, Patricia said. Her temperature normalized yesterday. She's eating well. She looked at him with the particular attention of someone taking a reading. You going to be okay going in? Yeah, Ryan said. He wasn't sure he was telling the truth. He pushed open the door. Lily was in a clear bassinet wrapped in a hospital blanket patterned with small yellow ducks. She was awake, her eyes dark and wide and unfocused in the way of very young babies, seeing everything and nothing at once move toward the door when it opened. Toward him. Ryan crossed the room and stood over the bassinet. For a long time, he didn't say anything. He just looked at her. The shape of her nose, the set of her brows. He looked for Sarah in her face and found her quietly, like finding a familiar song playing from a distant room. The same soft curve at the corner of the mouth. The same slight furrow when she was thinking about something. Hey, he said softly. I'm Ryan. I'm your uncle. He stopped. I know that doesn't mean much to you right now. You're very small and I'm basically a stranger. But I've been thinking about you a lot this week, so he reached into the bassinet and let her grip his index finger the way she had in the park. She held on immediately firmly like she'd been waiting for something solid. I'm sorry I didn't find you sooner. I'm sorry I didn't find your mom sooner either. His voice went rough at the edges. He smoothed it out by force of will. That's not going to happen again. You are not going to be alone again. Okay. Lily looked up at him with her wide, dark eyes and held onto his finger. Okay, Ryan said, answering himself. He stayed for 2 hours. Patricia came in twice and didn't say anything about visiting hours. When he finally left, he went straight to the library, used their computer for 3 hours, and by the end of that afternoon, he had done 3 things. He had found a furnished room for rent month to month, $350, on a street 6 blocks from the hospital. He had called a man named Dabrowski, who owed him a significant favor, and arranged 3 weeks of work as a mechanic at Dabrowski's shop in Maplewood. And he had called Gerald at Family Services, left a message, and given his new address. He was building a life, from scratch, in a town he'd never meant to stop in. He was 41 years old, and he was starting over for a woman who weighed 9 pounds and had never said his name. It was, he would think later, the sanest thing he'd ever done. Gerald called back the next morning. His voice was different than it had been in the office, less practiced, more genuine. News traveled in small offices. Detective Mays contacted me, Gerald said, about the biological connection. This changes the assessment profile significantly, Mr. Carter. I want you to understand that doesn't mean this is easy. It means it's possible. There's a meaningful difference. I understand the difference, Ryan said. We'll need to expedite the home study given the circumstances. And there's something else you need to know. Gerald paused, and Ryan felt the same thing he'd felt in Mays's office, the weight of a door about to open. The biological father has been identified. Marcus Hale has been contacted by our office. Ryan's hand tightened on the phone. He's retained legal counsel, Gerald continued. He's asserting parental rights. The room was very quiet for a moment. He left her in the snow, Ryan said. He drove to a park in the middle of the night and left a newborn baby in the snow with a note that said she was nobody. I know, Gerald said, and he's asserting parental rights. He has a legal right to do so until those rights are formally terminated by a court. How does that happen, the termination? It's a process. It requires a hearing, evidence of abandonment, documentation of unfitness. A pause, It's not impossible, but he has resources, Mr. Carter. Significant ones. He'll fight this. So will I, Ryan said. You'll need an attorney? I know. Do you have one? Not yet. I can give you a referral. There are organizations that handle. I'll find one, Ryan said. Thank you, Gerald. He hung up and sat with his hands on his knees for a moment. Then he picked the phone back up and called the only other number he knew to call. This time she answered. Ryan. Deb Holloway's voice was warm and familiar, and it hit him somewhere unexpected the way it always did after a long silence. She had been his sister Sarah's closest friend, and after Sarah died, she had called him twice, and he had not called back. That was on him. He knew it. Deb, I need to tell you something. I got your voicemail, she said. I've been worried. What's going on? He told her, all of it. The park, the baby, the birth record, the name, Sarah. He said his sister's name and felt it cost him something, but kept going. When he was done, the line was quiet for so long he thought the call had dropped. Lily, Deb said finally. Her voice had changed completely. Oh, Ryan. You knew. A beat of silence. I knew Sarah was pregnant. She told me not to tell you. She wanted to wait until. Deb's voice broke, pulled itself back together. She wanted to fix things with you first. She was going to call you. She was going to tell you everything. Ryan closed his eyes. She talked about you all the time, Deb said. Even when you weren't talking, she never stopped. Another break. She loved you, Ryan. You have to know that. He knew. He had always known it. That was the particular cruelty of the years he'd wasted. Marcus, Deb said, and the name came out differently with a bitterness that told him she'd known this man, known what he was. She tried to tell me he was different, that he'd come around. I didn't believe her. Her voice went hard. I didn't know he'd do something like this. I didn't know he was capable of. Deb. Ryan kept his voice even. Do you know his lawyers? Anyone connected to him? Anything that could help. I know people, she said. Let me make some calls. And Ryan, she stopped. Don't do anything stupid. Mace told me the same thing. Then maybe listen this time. A pause softer. She's okay, Lily. She's okay. She held my finger for 2 hours. A long silence. When Deb spoke again, her voice was quiet and sure. Sarah would have wanted you to do this. You know that, right? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. 2 days later, on a Thursday morning, with 2 inches of new snow on the ground, Ryan walked into the office of an attorney named Carol Huang, who came recommended by Deb's network, who charged on a sliding scale, who had spent 11 years doing family law and had the particular stillness of someone who had heard everything and was not surprised by any of it. She read the file he brought her. She read it completely without rushing while Ryan sat across from her and waited. When she was done, she put it down and looked at him. He's going to come after your background, she said. The club, the gaps in employment, the lack of a stable home prior to this month. He'll paint a picture. I know. And his attorneys are going to be expensive and aggressive. Hale Brennan Capital Group. She said the name with precisely the neutrality of someone who had strong feelings about it. Has retained Whitmore and Associates. They are not small. I know that too. What do you have? She asked. It wasn't rhetorical. She was leaning forward, her pen ready. Ryan thought about it. I have a clean record. I have a job starting Monday. I have a room that I'm renting which I can make into something suitable. I have a biological connection to the child. He paused. And I have a note. He reached into his jacket and put the folded slip of paper on her desk. That he wrote, and left on her, in the snow. Carol Huang looked at the note. She picked it up carefully, read it, set it down. We'll need handwriting analysis to connect it definitively to Hale, she said. Can we get it? If the police are pursuing abandonment charges, and from what you're telling me, it sounds like they are, yes. The evidence chain is ours to use in the family proceeding. She looked at him with sharp, clear eyes. This is not a guaranteed outcome, Ryan. I want you to understand that. He will fight for rights he doesn't deserve because men with money often fight for things they don't deserve. The court doesn't always get it right. I know, Ryan said. I want to try anyway. She nodded once. Then let's get to work. He walked out of Carol Huang's office 40 minutes later with a manila folder of paperwork, a court date pending, and the specific, exhausted clarity of someone who has chosen a very hard road and knows it and is walking it anyway. He went to the hospital. He sat with Lily for an hour. She was awake and warm, and she held his finger the whole time, and he talked to her in a low voice about nothing in particular. The weather, the motel, the mechanic job, the way you talk to someone you love, when the words themselves don't matter, only the sound of your voice. He was still talking when his phone vibrated in his pocket. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer it. Then he did. The voice on the other end was smooth and measured and deeply deliberately calm. The voice of a man who had spent years making sure he sounded like the most reasonable person in every room. Mr. Carter, my name is Marcus Hale. I think it's time we had a conversation. Ryan looked down at Lily. She was still holding his finger. I don't think, Ryan said slowly, that you and I have anything to talk about. I understand why you feel that way, but I'd like the chance to explain myself, man to man, before this gets complicated. Ryan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, it's already complicated. It doesn't have to get worse. A pause, calibrated, practiced. I loved Sarah. I want you to know that. Don't, Ryan said, just the one word, flat and final. A beat of silence. When Hale spoke again, the smoothness had a different quality, still controlled, but underneath it, something harder. I have resources, and I have time, and I have attorneys who are very good at their jobs. I'm not saying that as a threat. I'm saying it as a fact that should inform your decisions going forward. Ryan looked down at Lily, her dark eyes, her steady grip. So do I, he said. You have resources. I have time, Ryan said, and I don't give up on family. He ended the call. He sat with Lily for another 20 minutes, and when he finally stood to leave, he felt something settle into place inside him. Not confidence exactly, not certainty. Something more like the feeling before a fight when you've already decided you're not walking away. When the outcome is unknown, but the decision is made. When you're done calculating and you're just in it. He was in it. He tucked the blanket around Lily's shoulders with his rough, calloused hands, and he leaned down and said quietly so only she could hear it, "Nobody's getting you. You understand me, nobody." She gripped his finger one more time. And somewhere in Denver, Marcus Hale was on the phone with his attorneys, and the fight for Lily Carter had already begun. The first hearing was set for a Friday morning, 3 weeks after Ryan had found Lily in the snow. 3 weeks that had moved both faster and slower than any time he could remember fast, because he was always moving, always doing something, filing something, meeting someone, proving something. Slow, because every night he sat in his rented room alone and felt the particular weight of a man fighting a battle. He wasn't sure the rules were designed for him to win. He had started the mechanic job at Dobrowski's on Monday of the second week. He was good with engines, always had been, and Dobrowski, a broad Slovak man, who communicated primarily through grunts and the occasional approving nod, asked no questions about his past and expected the work done right. Ryan did it right. He showed up early and left late and put the money directly into a bank account he had opened 3 days prior, the first bank account he'd had in 11 years, because Carol Huang had told him that financial documentation would matter, and he believed her. He had also in that same second week received a formal letter from Whitmore and Associates, Marcus Hale's legal team, informing him that their client intended to assert full parental rights and would be pursuing primary custody of the minor child identified as Lily Carter. The letter was 4 pages long and written in the kind of legal language designed to make a person feel small. Ryan read it twice, put it in the manila folder with everything else, and drove it to Carol's office. Carol had read it standing up, which meant she was either in a hurry or the letter made her want to move. He suspected both. "They're going to argue that his abandonment was temporary and situational," she said, "that he was in a state of emotional crisis following Sarah's death and made a catastrophic error in judgment for which he is now seeking to make amends." "He left a newborn baby in the snow," Ryan said. "I know that. You know that. The question is whether the judge looks at the man in front of them, cleaned up, emotional, expensive suit, or the man who did it." She set the letter down. "They're also going to argue that his financial stability makes him better equipped to provide for Lily's needs. He abandoned her." "Ryan," she looked at him directly, "I need you to stop saying that to me and start saying it to yourself differently. Don't say it like it's self-evident. Say it like you're going to have to prove it in a room full of people who don't know any of you, because that's exactly what we're going to have to do." He nodded. He didn't like it. He nodded anyway. "The police investigation helps us," Carol continued. "If Maze's team can formally connect Hale to the abandonment before the hearing, the plate, the footage, the handwriting on the note, that's evidence of a criminal act, not just poor judgment. Criminal abandonment is a different standard than I made a mistake. It speaks directly to fitness." She picked up her pen. "I'm calling Maze today. We need to know where they are." Ryan left Carol's office and drove to the hospital. He did this every day. It was not something he had decided consciously. It had simply become part of the structure of his days, as natural and necessary as sleep, which he was not getting enough of. Lily had been moved to a foster placement 3 days earlier, a woman named Helen Park, 54, a licensed foster care with 12 years of experience who lived 20 minutes from the hospital. The social worker, Gerald, had made the introduction with the diplomatic care of a man arranging a ceasefire. Helen was practical, warm in an unsentimental way, and had made it immediately clear to Ryan that she was not the enemy. "I'm the bridge," she'd told him on the first visit, standing in her kitchen while Lily slept in the next room. "My job is to keep her safe and healthy until there's a permanent situation. I don't pick sides. I just pick what's good for her." "That's all I'm picking too," Ryan had said. Helen had studied him for a long moment. "You know how to change a diaper." "I've been learning." "Good. Come at 10 tomorrow. I'll show you the formula ratio she's on. She's a good eater." A pause. "She sleeps better when someone's holding her. I thought you should know that." He had come at 10 and 11 and every morning and afternoon since working his schedule at Dobrowski's around the visits the way other men work their schedules around golf or church. This was his church. This was his everything. He was at Helen's on Wednesday afternoon, sitting in the rocking chair Helen had positioned by the window, Lily against his chest, when his phone rang. "Carol Huang." He answered it one-handed. The handwriting analysis came back, Carol said, and her voice had the particular flatness of someone delivering news they want to be careful with. It's a match. The note found with Lily matches samples from documents Marcus Hale signed in the past 18 months. The police have enough to move on the abandonment charge. Ryan held Lily a little tighter without realizing it. When Mays is presenting to the DA today, if they authorize the charge, and Carol said she expects them to, Hale will be contacted by end of week. A pause. This is good for us, Ryan. Formally charged with criminal abandonment is a different posture in family court than a civil dispute. But, she stopped. But, Ryan repeated, his attorneys are going to move fast. They know this is coming. They may file an emergency motion for temporary custody before the charge lands. Get him in front of a family court judge as a grieving father before we can get the criminal angle in front of the same judge. She let that land for a moment. It's a legal chess move. Ugly, but legal. Can they get it? Emergency custody motions require showing immediate risk to the child. He'd have to argue that your situation is the risk unstable history, no permanent home, no parenting experience. I have a boy. I have a room. I've been with her every day. I know, that's exactly what I'll argue, but I'm telling you this so you're not surprised. Another pause, shorter this time. How are you holding up? The question caught him off guard. People had been asking him logistical questions for 3 weeks. Carol was the first one to ask that. I'm fine, he said automatically. Ryan, he looked down at Lily. She was asleep, her mouth slightly open, one hand curled against his collarbone. I'm scared, he said. Is that what you want me to say? I'm scared I'm going to do everything right and it still won't be enough. That's honest, Carol said. Good, use that, not in court, but use it to keep moving. A beat of quiet. I'll call you when I hear from Mays. She hung up. Ryan sat in the rocking chair for a long time, not moving. Lily rising and falling with his breathing. Helen came in from the kitchen, read the room in one look, and set a cup of coffee on the table beside him without saying a word. He picked it up with his free hand and drank it, and the quiet between them was the good kind, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. His lawyers called me, Helen said, finally sitting across from him. Ryan went very still. When this morning, asked if I'd be willing to speak to their assessment team about Lily's needs, about the visits. She looked at him steadily, no particular expression on her face. I told them I speak to the court-appointed guardian ad litem and to the social worker. That's my lane. I told them they needed to stay in theirs. Ryan let out a slow breath. Thank you. Don't thank me. I didn't do it for you. She looked at Lily. I did it for her because she doesn't need adults using her as a negotiating chip. She needs someone to hold her and feed her and keep it simple. She looked back at Ryan. You do that. Whatever else you are or were when you walk through my door, you do that. So I told them to go find their own lane. He didn't say anything. He couldn't quite trust his voice. Their assessment team is coming anyway, Helen said. Not to me, to the social worker's office. They're building a comparative profile, Hale versus you, resources, stability, environment. She paused. You should know they've hired a private investigator. You have any skeletons I should know about? I have a whole graveyard, Ryan said flatly, but everything in it is old. How old? 18 years and older. Helen nodded. Then hold your head up. The PI showed up at Dabrowski's shop on Thursday. Ryan spotted him in 40 seconds, late 40s, too clean for a mechanic shop, asking Dabrowski questions about Ryan's schedule with the casual ease of someone who thought they were being subtle. Dabrowski, to his credit, told the man he had engine oil to deal with and pointed him toward the door. He came to Ryan directly after. Man asking questions about you? I know. What did you tell him? Dabrowski shrugged, a movement that took his whole upper body. That you show up on time and you do good work and I don't answer questions about my employees. He picked up a wrench. This baby situation. You going to win? I'm going to try. Dabrowski made the grunt that Ryan had learned meant something between respect and sympathy. My father came to this country with nothing, he said without looking up from the engine. Nobody thought he was fit for anything either. He turned to Bolt. He was the finest man I ever knew. Ryan looked at him. Thank you, Frank. Don't get sentimental. Go finish the Subaru. The PII. Filed his report. 2 days later, Carol called with the summary that Whitmore and Associates had submitted to the court. Ryan sat at his kitchen table and listened to her read the relevant sections. His history with the Hells Angels, including the federal file on the club, though Carol noted immediately that Ryan had no individual charges. His transient lifestyle over 2 decades, his lack of documented relationships, his absence from his sister's life in her final years. Each fact accurate and each fact arranged like a prosecutor's opening statement. "They're good," Carol said when she finished reading. "I won't lie to you, this is a strong filing." "What do we have?" "We have the criminal charge which Mays confirmed the DIA approved this morning. Marcus Hale is being charged with criminal abandonment. He will be arraigned next Tuesday." A pause. "We have your employment record, your new lease, your daily documented visits with Lily. We have Helen's informal support, which I believe she'll formalize if asked." Another pause. "And we have something that came in this morning that I didn't expect." The way she said it made Ryan sit straighter. "Deb Holloway," Carol said. "She contacted me. She has Sarah's phone. Sarah's actual phone, which the family recovered from the accident and which Deb has been keeping. On that phone are voice messages, 11 of them, from Sarah to Deb." Carol's voice was careful now, like she was moving something fragile. "Sarah left the last one 4 days before she died. Ryan, she talks about Lily, she talks about Marcus, and she talks about you." The room was very quiet. "What does she say?" he asked. His voice came out lower than he intended. "She says," Carol stopped, and for the first time in their professional relationship, he heard something close to emotion slip through. "She says she's been thinking about calling you, that she wants Lily to know her uncle, that she thinks whatever happened between you two, you're the kind of man who shows up for family." A beat. Those are almost her exact words. The kind of man who shows up for family. Ryan put his elbow on the table and pressed his hand over his eyes. "Ryan, I'm here," he said. "This is admissible. It goes to intent, Sarah's wishes for her daughter. It goes to character, your character as assessed by the person who knew you best." Carol paused. "It also goes to Marcus. In one of the earlier messages, Sarah describes a conversation with him in which he told her directly that he didn't want the child and that if she continued the pregnancy, he was done. He said that. In Sarah's own words, on a voicemail she left for her best friend with a timestamp 9 months ago." Carol let that sit. He's going to have a very hard time explaining that away in front of a judge. Ryan didn't say anything for a long moment. He was thinking about Sarah, about the last time he'd seen her, a parking lot argument about nothing that turned into everything, as arguments between siblings sometimes do. About the 14 months since she died that he'd spent on the road moving, not thinking about it. About all the voicemails he hadn't listened to because he hadn't been ready to hear her voice. She'd been leaving messages for Deb. She'd been talking about him. She'd still been his sister, even when he'd been bad at being her brother. "Use everything," he said finally. "I will," Carol said. "There's one more thing, and I want you to think before you react." "Tell me." "Hale's attorney contacted me today, directly, before the arraignment." She paused precisely. "They want to discuss a settlement." Ryan frowned. "What kind of settlement?" "They're calling it a voluntary relinquishment agreement. Hale would formally withdraw his custody claim in exchange for..." She stopped. "In exchange for your agreement not to cooperate with the criminal investigation." The silence that followed had a specific quality, the kind of silence that arrives when someone has said something so wrong it takes a moment for the air to adjust. "He wants me to protect them from the abandonment charge," Ryan said slowly, "in exchange for Lily. That's what's being proposed. He's trying to buy his way out of a criminal charge with his own daughter." "Yes," Carol said, "that's essentially what's happening." Ryan stood up. He walked to the window of his rented room. The street below was ordinary and cold people going about their lives unaware that in a small room above them, a man was deciding whether to take the easier road or the right one. "If I take the deal," he said, "does he go free?" "Not necessarily. The DA's charge exists independently of your cooperation. But your testimony, your account of finding her, the note that's significant supporting evidence. Without it, their case is thinner. So he might go free." "It's possible." Ryan turned from this window. And if I refuse the deal, then we go to court. He fights for custody with everything he has. We fight back with everything we have. And a judge decides. She paused. It won't be clean. It won't be quick. And I cannot promise you the outcome. He left her in the snow, Carol. He wrote that note, and he drove away, and he let her lie there. His voice was completely level now, the way it had been in the police station, the way it got when he'd moved past emotion into something harder and quieter. He doesn't get to trade her. She's not a piece in his game. I know. Tell them no. A beat. You understand what you're choosing. I understand exactly what I'm choosing, Ryan said. Tell them no. Carol told them no. And that afternoon, Marcus Hale's attorneys filed an emergency motion for temporary custody, citing Ryan's background and instability, requesting that the court place Lily with her biological father pending the full hearing. Gerald called Ryan at 5:15. His voice was strained. The motion has been filed. There will be an emergency hearing next Thursday. The judge will hear both sides and make a temporary determination. He paused. I have to be honest with you, Ryan. The motion has some teeth. His attorneys are arguing that. I know what they're arguing, Ryan said. Are you okay? No, Ryan has said, which surprised them both. But I'm going to be fine. There's a difference. That night after dark, Ryan drove to Helen's house, not during visiting hours. He just parked outside and sat there for a few minutes. The lights were on. Inside, Lily was asleep, fed and warm, and held, not knowing that grown men with briefcases and motions and settlement offers were arranging the world around her tiny body. She didn't know. She just slept. Ryan sat in the dark outside and felt something clarify inside him that had been murky for weeks. He was not a man who had led a perfect life. He had made choices he couldn't take back, been absent when he should have been present, chosen motion over connection for 20 years because connection cost something and motion was free. He knew all of that. He wasn't going to pretend otherwise in front of any judge. But he had found her. He had picked her up. He had stayed. And Marcus Hale, with his Range Rover, in his Capital Group, in his $1,000 suits, in his attorneys who called settlement proposals at 9 in the morning, Marcus Hale had driven to a park in the middle of a Colorado night and left a note that said she was nobody. Ryan pulled out his phone. He opened the voicemail app. He went to the folder of saved messages he had never deleted, and he found the last one Sarah had left him 8 months ago before the accident, unanswered because he'd told himself he'd call back when he was ready. He pressed play. Her voice came through the speaker, clear and warm, and so familiar it was like being hit. Hey, it's me. I know you're probably on the road somewhere being stubborn about something. I wanted to hear your voice, even if it's just the voicemail version. I miss you, Ryan. I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I've got some stuff going on and I want to tell you about it, but I want to tell you in person. So call me back when you're ready. I'm not going anywhere. I'll always pick up. She'd always pick up. He sat with that for a long time. Then he put his phone in his pocket, started the engine, and drove back to his rented room. He had a hearing in 6 days. He had Carol Huang and 11 voicemails and a handwriting analysis and a clean record and a job and a lease and Helen Park, and every single morning he'd shown up. He had the note in his jacket pocket and the memory of a baby opening her eyes in the snow and looking at him like he was the only solid thing in the world. He had no money. He had no status. He had no connections to people who wore suits in rooms where decisions were made. He had something else. He got into bed at 9:30 and lay in the dark with his hands behind his head and stared at the ceiling, and he was afraid in the clean, honest way of a man who knows exactly what he stands to lose and is going to stand up anyway. Thursday was 6 days away. He would be ready. Thursday came the way hard days always come, without ceremony, without warning, that this was the one that mattered, just another gray Colorado morning that happened to contain the rest of Ryan Carter's life inside it. He was up at 4:30, not because he'd set an alarm, because he hadn't slept more than 90 minutes at a stretch in 6 days, and at 4:30 his body simply stopped pretending. He lay there for 20 minutes staring at the ceiling, then got up, made coffee, and sat at his kitchen table with the manila folder open in front of him, reading documents he had already memorized, because doing anything was better than sitting still with the fear. Carol had called the night before. Her voice had been careful and calibrated, in the way that told him she was managing him. I want to go over expectations, she had said. Go ahead. The emergency hearing tomorrow is not the final custody determination. The judge is deciding temporary placement only where Lily lives while the full case proceeds. It is possible, maybe likely, that they'll leave her with Helen as neutral ground rather than placing her with either party. That's actually our preferred outcome. It keeps Hale away from her, and it keeps you in the picture. And if they don't do that, a pause. If the judge is persuaded by Hale's motion, which argues that as biological father he has a presumptive right to temporary placement, then Lily could go to him pending the full hearing. Ryan had been quiet for a moment. How long would the full hearing take to schedule? Minimum 6 weeks, possibly 3 months. 3 months. Lily was 10 weeks old. 3 months was longer than she'd been alive. He had done the math before Carol finished the sentence, and it had hit him like something physical. We're not going to let that happen, Carol had said, reading his silence accurately. But I want you ready for any outcome tomorrow, prepared, not panicked. Can you do that? Oh, yes, he'd said. He hadn't been entirely sure he was telling the truth. Now at 4:45 in the morning, sitting over cold coffee and paperwork, he was still working on it. His phone lit up with a text. Deb Holloway. She'd driven up from Denver the night before and was staying at the Ridgeline 3 rooms down from where he'd started 5 weeks ago. The text said, I'm awake too. Come have breakfast. I make eggs. He went. Deb Holloway was 52 small, with Sarah's same dark eyes and the kind of direct manner that came from decades of not having time for anything indirect. She had a travel skillet plugged into the motel room's outlet and was making scrambled eggs when Ryan knocked. She opened the door, handed him a fork, and said nothing about the fact that he looked like he hadn't slept in a week, which was exactly the right call. They ate standing at the small counter. The eggs were good. Ryan hadn't realized he was hungry until he started eating. She called me the night before the accident, Deb said. She wasn't looking at him. She was watching the skillet. I've been thinking about whether to tell you that. I decided you should know. She finally looked up. She said she was going to call you the next morning. She'd written your number on a piece of paper. I found it in her apartment after. Just your number. No note, like she'd been building up to it. Ryan set down his fork. She was going to call, Deb said simply. I need you to know that, because I know you're carrying it. He was carrying it. He had been carrying it since the police station, since Mays had slid the birth record across the table, since the moment he'd understood that he and Sarah had been moving toward each other in the final weeks of her life, without knowing it, like two people trying to find each other in the dark, reaching out, and the distance had been just barely too much. She would have called, he said. She was going to call, Deb confirmed. And you would have answered. I know you would have. He did know that. It didn't make the wait less, but it changed the shape of it. The voicemails, he said, they're ready for today. Carol has copies. I kept the originals. Deb picked up her fork. He's going to be there today. Hale, you know that. I know. Can you be in a room with him? Ryan considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. I can be in a room with him, he said. I can't promise what I think about him, but I can control what I do. Carol made that point several times. Smart woman. She is. Deb put her hand on his arm briefly, not sentimental, just solid, the kind of touch that says, I'm here without making a production of it. Sarah made a good choice, she said, even if she didn't get to finish making it. He left Deb's room at 6:15 and drove to Helen's. Too early for a visit, he knew that. He parked outside and didn't go in. He just sat there for 10 minutes, the engine running, looking at the lit window of the room where he knew Lily was, and let that be enough. Then he drove to the courthouse. Carol was already in the hallway outside the courtroom when he arrived, standing with a second attorney from her office, a younger man named Torres, who handled family law filings and had the organized efficiency of someone who had taken very good notes in law school. Carol looked at Ryan, looked at his face, looked at his suit, the only one he owned, purchased 4 days ago from a second-hand shop, charcoal gray, slightly large in the shoulders, but clean and pressed, and nodded once. Good, she said. You look like someone who takes this seriously. I do take this seriously. I know. The suit says the same thing. That matters. She handed him a folder. We got a late development this morning. I was going to call, but I figured you'd be here early. Ryan opened the folder. Inside was a single-page summary from Detective Mays' office. The DA had filed the criminal abandonment charge against Marcus Hale 3 days earlier as expected. What was unexpected was what had happened next. A woman named Jennifer Cho, a former personal assistant at Hale Brennan Capital, had contacted Mays voluntarily after seeing a brief news item about the case. She had provided a signed statement. Ryan read it in the hallway outside the courtroom, standing completely still. According to Jennifer Cho, Marcus Hale had called her from his car at 11:50 p.m. on the night Lily was left in the park. He had been, in her words, calm and businesslike. He had asked her to reroute 2 meetings the following week. Then, before hanging up, he had said, and she had written this in the statement because it had struck her as strange enough to remember, "Clean slate from here." 11:50 p.m., 9 minutes after the timestamp on the park camera showing Hale's Range Rover exiting. "Clean slate from here." Ryan closed the folder. The rage moved through him quick and cold, and he let it move through the way you let a wave move through without fighting it, and on the other side of it was something harder and quieter and more useful. "This is going in front of the judge today," he asked. "Mays is submitting it as supplementary evidence in the criminal file. I'm filing a motion to have it considered in the family proceeding. Whether the judge allows it at the emergency hearing level?" Carol tilted her head, is uncertain. "But even if it doesn't come in today, it changes the atmosphere in that room. His attorneys know we have it." As if on cue, the elevator at the end of the hall opened and 3 people stepped out. 2 of them were in suits that cost more than Ryan's motorcycle. Between them was Marcus Hale. In person, he was everything the corporate headshot had suggested and nothing that Ryan had expected. Tall, controlled, handsome in the way of men who have always been told they were and have organized their lives around it. He wore the look of a man who had convinced himself that he was the protagonist of this story, the remorseful father, the grieving partner, the man who had made one terrible mistake and was now seeking redemption. He saw Ryan from 30 feet away, and their eyes met and held for exactly 3 seconds. Ryan didn't look away. He didn't need to. He just looked at Marcus Hale the way you look at something you have already decided about, with perfect stillness and complete clarity. And then he looked back at Carol. "We're ready," he said. Marcus Hale looked away first. The courtroom was smaller than Ryan had imagined from his library research. Judge Patricia Okonkwo presided 60 precise, with the reputation, according to Carol, of someone who had very little patience for theater and an excellent instinct for the difference between a performance and a truth. Ryan took note of that and filed it. Hale's lead attorney, a man named Bryce Whitmore, silver-haired smooth, the kind of smooth that came from decades of being the most confident person in whatever room he entered, opened by framing Marcus Hale as a man who had suffered devastating loss. The death of his partner, the shock of a birth he had not been prepared for, a moment of catastrophic judgment in a state of grief that he deeply, profoundly regretted. "My client," Whitmore said in the tone of a man delivering a closing argument, "when it was only the opening, comes before this court not as the villain he has been painted, but as a father, a flawed human being who made an unforgivable error, and who in power and love, in responsibility, in the name of the child who is as much his as anyone's, asking this court for the chance to be what he should have been from the beginning." Ryan kept his face neutral. He was good at that. 20 years of sitting at bars and card tables and chapter meetings with men he didn't entirely trust had given him that skill, and he was grateful for it now. Carol stood. She was shorter than Whitmore by 8 inches and addressed the judge with the directness of someone who knew that every extra word was a liability. "Your Honor, the petitioner before this court, Ryan Carter, is the maternal uncle of the child and the individual who found her, left in below freezing temperatures, hypothermic, wrapped in a thin blanket, with a note identifying her as, quote, no one's child. He called emergency services, stayed with her, and has been present every single day since. He secured employment, housing, and legal representation. He is the only consistent presence in this child's life outside of her foster carer." She paused for exactly the right length. The respondent, Marcus Hale, left her there. He drove to that park, placed that child on that bench, and drove away. He is now in this courtroom because a criminal abandonment charge has made remaining invisible no longer convenient. She looked at the judge steadily. This court should not reward that calculation. Judge Okonkwo's expression didn't change. She made a note. Whitmore called Marcus Hale to speak. He did so with the practiced delivery of a man who had been coached extensively. His voice broke in the right places. He spoke about Sarah with the tenderness of someone who had rehearsed tenderness. He spoke about his fear, his panic, his failure of character, all the words that sounded like accountability, while carefully sidestepping anything that looked like it from the inside. Ryan watched the judge while Hale spoke. She was watching Hale and her pen had stopped moving. Then Carol called Ryan. He sat into the chair and looked at Judge Okonkwo and spoke the truth the only way he knew how, plainly, without decoration, without performance, because he had never been good at performance, and this was not the moment to start. "I found her in the snow," he said. "I didn't know who she was. I just knew she was alone and cold, and she needed someone to stay." He stopped. "I stayed. I've stayed every day since. I'm not going to stop staying." He paused and then said the thing he'd been turning over for 6 days, the thing that was at the bottom of everything. "I know what it is to have nobody show up. I know what that does to a person over time. I don't want that for her. I don't want that for Lily. That's all I've got. But I mean every word of it." The courtroom was quiet. Judge Okonkwo made a note. Carol introduced the voicemails. Whitmore objected. The judge overruled him after 30 seconds of argument with the specific brevity of someone who found the objection unpersuasive. Sarah's voice played through the courtroom speaker, warm, unhurried, loving, and Ryan sat in the witness chair and kept his face still and did not look at Marcus Hale, because if he looked at Marcus Hale right now, he was not sure what would happen, and he had promised Carol he would do everything right. The last voicemail played, the one where Sarah said she was going to call her brother, the kind of man who shows up for family, her voice saying that in the room where her daughter's fate was being decided. Ryan heard someone behind him take an unsteady breath. He thought it might be Deb. He didn't turn around. Then Carol filed Mays's supplementary submission, the Jennifer Cho statement. Whitmore was on his feet immediately, loudly, with the specific volume of a man whose argument is weaker than his voice. Judge Okonkwo allowed 3 minutes of the objection and then held up one hand and said in the even tone of someone who has made her decision, "I've heard enough on that point, Mr. Whitmore." He sat, the room waited. Judge Okonkwo looked at her notes for a moment, then she looked at the room. "I'm going to make a temporary determination today," she said, with the understanding that this does not prejudge the full custody hearing. "However, I want to be clear that the evidence presented here, including the character evidence, the documented pattern of care by Mr. Carter, and the supplementary criminal submission, will inform my thinking." She paused. "Mr. Hale, you will have the opportunity to make your case at the full hearing. What you will not have today is temporary custody of this child." Ryan heard the breath come out of Carol beside him. "Lily Carter will remain in licensed foster care with her current carer, Helen Park, pending the full hearing. Mr. Carter's visitation schedule is to be formally documented and preserved. Any interference with that schedule," she looked directly at Whitmore, "will be viewed very unfavorably." She set down her pen. "We'll schedule the full hearing, 6 weeks. I expect both parties to come prepared." The gavel came down. Ryan sat completely still for a moment. The room moved around him, Whitmore leaning toward Hale, Carol's hand on Ryan's arm, the low murmur of people beginning to move. He sat still and let it settle over him. Not victory, not yet, but not loss either. Lily was safe. Lily was staying where she was. He would see her tomorrow and the day after that, and every day through 6 more weeks of preparing and filing and building the case that Carol was going to make in front of this same judge in this same room. He stood. He straightened his second-hand suit jacket. He turned. Marcus Hale was 6 feet away, and for a moment there was a gap in the crowd between them. Just the two of them, eye to eye, with nothing else in the way. Hale's composure had cracked slightly. Not much, just at the edges where the real man leaked through the rehearsed one. His jaw was tight. His eyes were cold in a way the courtroom hadn't seen because he'd been careful to keep that part hidden. He leaned slightly forward. His voice was very low. "This isn't over." "No," Ryan agreed quietly, "it isn't. You have no idea what I can do." Ryan looked at him for a long moment. "You left a baby in the snow," he said, "and you called it a clean slate." He held the man's gaze. "I know exactly what you can do, and I know exactly what you won't do again." He turned and walked toward the doors and didn't look back. Carol caught up with him in the hallway. Her face was carefully professional, but her eyes said something else. That was good in there, she said. Your testimony. The judge heard you. I told the truth. That's what I mean. She walked beside him. 6 weeks, Ryan. We need to use every day of it. We need to document everything, every visit, every interaction, every dollar earned, every improvement in the home setup. We need character witnesses. We need to build a picture that is so complete and so consistent that a judge cannot look at it and find the gap. She paused. And we need to prepare for what Whitmore is going to bring. He lost today, and men like Whitmore don't take that quietly. He's going to come back harder. Let him. I need you ready for what harder looks like. Carol. Ryan stopped walking. She stopped with him. He looked at her directly. The first night I found her, she was barely breathing. She'd been in the snow long enough that the paramedics were running. And she held my finger. He let that sit for a beat. I have been scared every day since, but I have not one time thought about stopping. That's not going to change in 6 weeks. So tell me what I need to do and I'll do it. Carol looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded once the nod of someone who has just received the information they needed. Come to my office at 8 tomorrow morning, she said. Bring coffee. We have a lot of work to do. He left the courthouse and drove directly to Helen's. It was mid-afternoon, well within visiting hours, and Helen opened the door before he knocked, which meant she'd been watching for him. She handed him Lily without preamble, the way a person hands something irreplaceable to the one person they trust, with it, and Ryan took her and held her and said nothing for a long time. Lily was awake, alert the way she'd been getting these past few days, taking in the world with those dark, serious eyes, like she was cataloging everything. She looked at Ryan and made the sound she made that wasn't quite a word yet, but was aimed at him, had been aimed at him specifically for 2 weeks now, and he felt it the way he always felt it, low and certain and enormous. We're okay, he told her quietly. We've got 6 more weeks, and then we do this for real. But we're okay. Helen handed him a bottle without being asked and went back to the kitchen. From the other room, she called, I had a call from Gerald this afternoon. Ryan looked up, and he wanted to know if I'd be willing to submit a formal written assessment in support of your placement. A beat. I told him yes. Ryan sat with that for a moment. Helen, he said, don't. Her voice came back dry and fond from the kitchen. I told you I don't do it for you, I do it for her. He looked down at Lily. She had both hands wrapped around the bottle and was eating with the focused determination she brought to everything. I know, he said, but thank you anyway. Outside, the afternoon was getting dark fast, the way Colorado afternoons did in winter. 1 minute there was light, and then it was gone, like someone had made a decision. 6 weeks felt both endless and terrifyingly short. Marcus Hale was not done. Whitmore was not done. The fight that was coming would be harder than today, more personal, more targeted, because that was what men with resources did when they lost a round. They didn't back down, they sharpened. Ryan knew that. He sat with Lily and fed her her bottle and let himself have this hour exactly, this hour and nothing more. Because the hour after this would need him too, and the day after that, and the 6 weeks of days stretching forward to the courtroom where a judge would either give him his family or take her away. But right now, Lily was in his arms and she was warm, and she was eating, and she was looking at him like he was the only solid thing in the world. He held on. The 6 weeks did not pass gently. Whitmore came back the way Carol had predicted, harder, more targeted, more personal. The first week after the emergency hearing, a story appeared in a small Denver lifestyle blog with enough specific details about Ryan's past that it was clearly seeded. Former Hell's Angel, transient lifestyle, no family of his own. Sources close to the case question whether a man with no history of stable relationships is equipped to raise an infant girl. The piece didn't name Ryan directly, careful enough to stay on the legal side of defamation, but it named the case, and the case named him by implication. Carol sent a cease and desist to Whitmore's office. Whitmore's office sent back a letter expressing polite ignorance of any media involvement. Carol put the correspondence in the file and told Ryan to stay off the internet. Don't read it, she said. Don't respond to it. Don't talk to anyone who might talk to anyone. You are a man going to work, coming home, visiting his niece. That is the entire story of your life right now. He did what she said. He went to work, he came home, he visited Lily, and in the margins of that routine, he did something else, something Carol hadn't asked for, but that turned out to matter more than either of them anticipated. He wrote things down, every visit, every milestone, a small notebook, plain cover, blue ink, the handwriting of a man who had never been asked to document love before and was teaching himself how. October 14th, she laughed today. Not a reflex, a real laugh. I was making a face at her, and she laughed. October 19th, she grabbed my collar when I went to put her down. Held on. October 23rd, she said something today that wasn't a word but was aimed at me. Helen heard it too. Helen said, "She's talking to you." He brought the notebook to Carol at their weekly meeting in the 4th week. She read 3 pages and looked up. "Where did you get the idea to do this?" she asked. "My sister used to keep a journal," he said. "She said the days you don't write down are the ones you lose first." He paused. "I don't want to lose any of these days." Carol looked at him for a moment, then looked back at the notebook. "I'm submitting this as exhibit evidence," she said. "Every page." Whitmore's next move came at the start of week 5. He filed a motion to introduce testimony from 2 former members of the motorcycle club Ryan had left 18 years ago. Men who would speak to the culture, the history, the character of the organization, and by extension, the character of anyone who had voluntarily been part of it. Carol filed a counter-motion arguing relevance and prejudice. The judge took 48 hours to rule. She denied Whitmore's motion. In her written ruling, 3 paragraphs precise and unambiguous. Judge Okonkwo noted that evidence of association with an organization absent specific criminal conduct by the individual in question spoke more to the prejudice of the court than to the fitness of the party. She noted that Ryan Carter had no criminal record of any kind. She noted that the motion appeared designed to introduce character evidence through association rather than action. She denied it. Carol called Ryan at 7 in the morning with the ruling. He was already at Dabrowski's, his hands inside an engine. "She denied it," Carol said. He took a breath. "Okay. That's 3 times now that Whitmore has tried something and the judge has pushed back. She's reading him Ryan. She's watching how he operates. And Hale? Hale has been quiet the last 10 days. Too quiet. A pause that had weight in it. His arraignment on the criminal charges next week. The DA is moving forward. He's going to enter a plea and his attorneys are going to try to minimize the sentencing exposure, but the charge exists and it is on record and it will be in front of Judge Okonkwo at the full hearing, whether Whitmore likes it or not. Dabrowski appeared in the doorway of the shop, coffee in hand, and raised his eyebrows at Ryan in the universal language of everything, okay? Ryan gave him a short nod. Dabrowski set the coffee on the workbench and withdrew without a word. The man had become, in his wordless, practical way, one of the most reliable presences in Ryan's life, and Ryan was aware of the strange grace in that. 1 week, Ryan said into the phone. 1 week, Carol confirmed, and then we go finish this. He worked until 6, went to Helen, sat with Lily for 2 hours. She was 3.5 months old now, and she had opinions about things about being put down when she didn't want to be, about the specific angle at which she preferred to be held about Ryan's face, which she studied with an intensity that made Helen laugh and made Ryan feel every single time like someone was reading a book he hadn't known he'd written. "She's going to be like you," Helen said that evening, watching Lily track Ryan's face as he moved. Ryan looked up. "What makes you say that?" "Stubborn," Helen said. "Observant, doesn't miss a thing." She smiled, small and real. "It's a compliment." He drove home that night in the dark and felt the fear shift slightly, not go away, not yet, but change shape. For 6 weeks, it had been a blunt thing, heavy and formless, sitting on his chest. Now it was sharper, more specific. The hearing was in 7 days. The fear had a deadline, and deadlines Ryan had found were the only thing that ever made him feel like he was in the right century. He opened the notebook and wrote, October 29th, 7 days. Helen says she's stubborn. I think that's the Carter in her. I think that's Sarah. I think she's gonna be okay no matter what happens, but I want to be there when she is. He closed the notebook and went to sleep at 9:15 and slept straight through until 5, which was the best night he'd had in 2 months. The morning of the hearing, Deb was back. She had driven up the night before again without being asked, and she was in the courthouse hallway when Ryan arrived at 8:15 with Carol and Torres. She was wearing Sarah's favorite color, a deep blue, and Ryan noticed it and didn't say anything, and she caught him noticing and nodded once. For luck, she said. She didn't believe in luck, Ryan said. I know, but I do. Deb squeezed his arm. Go get your daughter. He opened his mouth to correct her niece and then didn't, because the word Deb had used was the right word, and they both knew it, and there was no reason to argue with the truth this close to the moment it needed to be spoken out loud. Marcus Hale arrived 8 minutes before the hearing started. He looked different from the emergency hearing, still controlled, still expensive, but something had worn through at the surface. The arraignment 3 days earlier had cost him something visible. He had entered a plea of no contest to the criminal abandonment charge and had been sentenced to 18 months probation, a fine, and mandatory counseling. Whitmore had called it a resolution. The DA had called it accountability. Ryan had read the press release in Carol's office and said nothing. The no contest plea was not an admission of guilt under criminal law, but it was not a denial either, and it was going into that courtroom. Judge Okonkwo took the bench at 9 a.m. She had the same quality Ryan had noticed at the first hearing, the quality of someone who had been watching everything since before the hearing started and had already formed a preliminary view that she was now in the process of testing. Whitmore went first. He had retooled his approach, less sentimentality this time, more substance. He presented Hale's financial records, a trust fund established in Lily's name the previous month containing $250,000. He presented documentation of Hale's enrollment in parenting courses. He presented letters from 3 character witnesses, all of them connected to Hale Brennan, in ways that Carol had quietly noted in a prior filing and which Ryan suspected the judge had read. He presented a formal parenting plan prepared by a family counselor that detailed Hale's proposed schedule and support structure for Lily's upbringing. It was thorough. It was polished. It was the full apparatus of wealth organized in the service of an argument. Ryan watched the judge. Her pen moved. Her face did not. Then Carol stood. She did not begin with Ryan. She began with Lily. She submitted the medical records from the night Lily was found: core body temperature, degree of hypothermia, the attending physician's note that another 30 to 45 minutes of exposure would have resulted in serious and possibly irreversible harm. She put those numbers in front of the judge without comment and let them sit. Then she submitted the police report, the park camera footage log, the handwriting analysis, the Jennifer Cho statement. Clean slate from here. Said 9 minutes after leaving a newborn in below freezing temperatures. Said calmly, said to his assistant as a scheduling note, the way you'd say it after canceling a meeting you no longer needed to attend. She submitted the voicemails. Sarah's voice filled the courtroom again, and this time Ryan did not try to control his face. He let it do what it did. He let it be seen. She submitted Ryan's employment records, 6 weeks, not one missed shift. The lease, the bank account, and its steady, modest growth. Helen Park's formal written assessment, which Carol read one passage from aloud. Mr. Carter demonstrates consistent, attentive, and emotionally attuned caregiving. The child responds to him with a specificity and comfort level that in my 12 years of foster care, I associate with primary attachment. Disrupting that attachment at this stage would, in my professional opinion, cause the child significant harm. And then Carol submitted the notebook. She didn't read all of it. She read 7 entries chosen carefully, one from each week. The laugh, the collar, the face-making, the small, ordinary, sacred moments of a man learning to be someone's person. She read them in a quiet, level voice, and the courtroom was so still that Ryan could hear his own breathing. When she finished, she looked at the judge. Ryan Carter does not have a trust fund, she said. He does not have a corporate parenting plan or letters from business associates. What he has is a clean record, a steady job, a home, and 53 days of showing up every single day for a child who had nobody. She paused. He has a notebook, and in that notebook is the evidence of something that no financial document can replicate and no parenting course can manufacture in 6 weeks. Another pause shorter. He loves her. He has loved her since the night he found her, before he knew who she was, before there was any legal or biological reason to stay. He stayed because she needed someone to stay. Carol set down her folder. Your Honor, the law exists to serve the best interest of the child. The best interest of this child is the man sitting at this table. The silence after Carol sat down had a different quality from the one after Whitmore. Less performance in it, more weight. Judge Okonkwo looked at her notes for what felt like a long time. Then she looked at Ryan. Mr. Carter, is there anything you'd like to add? Ryan stood. He thought about everything Carol had said. He thought about the notebook. He thought about Sarah. He thought about Lily's face when she laughed. I found her in the snow, he said. She had nothing, no one, and I know what that feels like. He stopped. Let it be simple. I know what that feels like, and I decided right then that she would never feel it. Not one more day. He looked directly at the judge. I'm asking you to let me keep that promise. He sat. Judge Okonkwo made one final note. She set down her pen. She looked at the room. I've reviewed the full record in this matter, she said, including the temporary hearing documentation, the criminal proceeding, and its resolution, and the extensive evidentiary submissions presented today. She looked at Whitmore briefly, then back to the center of the room. The law directs this court to prioritize the best interest of the child above all other considerations. Not the financial interest, not the biological claim in isolation, not the preferences of adults whose behavior must be weighed against the impact on a child who cannot speak for herself. A pause. I have weighed those interests carefully. Ryan's hands under the table were pressed flat against his thighs. The parental rights of Marcus Hale are hereby terminated, Judge Okonkwo said. The court finds that the documented act of abandonment, combined with the circumstances thereof, the evidence of prior intent to disclaim paternity, and the no contest plea entered in the criminal matter constitute grounds for termination under Colorado statute. She looked at Hale directly. The trust established in the child's name will be transferred to a court-supervised account for the child's benefit. That money belongs to Lily Carter, not to the adults in this proceeding. Whitmore was on his feet. The judge held up one hand. I'm not finished, Mr. Whitmore. He sat. Regarding the petition for custody filed by Ryan Carter. Another pause. Ryan stopped breathing. The court finds that Mr. Carter has demonstrated over the course of this proceeding and through the evidence submitted a level of commitment, consistency, and genuine attachment to this child that this court does not take lightly. The court further finds that the child's established attachment to Mr. Carter, as documented by her licensed foster care, is a significant factor in this determination. She looked at Ryan. It is the order of this court that primary custody of the minor child Lily Marie Carter be granted to Ryan Carter, effective upon completion of the formal adoption certification process, to be completed within 90 days. She picked up her gavel. This court congratulates Mr. Carter, and this court wishes Lily Carter a long, stable, and loved life. The gavel came down. For a moment, Ryan Carter did not move. The room moved around him, Carol's hand on his arm, Torres saying something. Behind him, Deb making a sound that was not quite a word. Whitmore and Hale at their table, Whitmore leaning in, Hale staring at the surface of the table with the particular stillness of a man who has finally run out of moves. Ryan sat completely still and let it arrive. She was his. Lily was his. He stood. He shook Carol's hand and she gripped it back with both of hers, and for a moment her professional composure had a crack in it that she didn't bother to repair. Go see her, Carol said. Right now, go. He turned. Deb was there, and she didn't say anything, just put her arms around him briefly and fiercely, and he felt Sarah in the grip of it, in the way it was offered without condition, and he let himself feel it, and then stepped back and looked at Deb's face, which was wet and absolutely not apologizing for it. She would be so proud of you, Deb said. I'm going to go tell Lily, he said. Deb laughed through the tears. She's 4 months old, Ryan. She doesn't know what a custody hearing is. She'll know I came, he said. She always knows when I come. He walked out of the courthouse into the cold Colorado afternoon, and the cold felt different now. Not hostile, just air, just weather. Just the world being what it was, indifferent and real, and him moving through it towards something instead of away from it. He drove to Helen's. Helen opened the door before he reached it. She read his face in 1 second and stepped aside without a word, and he walked in, and Lily was in the bouncer seat in the living room, awake and alert. And the moment he came through the doorway, she did the thing she always did, turned her head towards him, found his face locked on. He crossed the room and picked her up. She grabbed his collar. Both hands, immediate and certain, the way she always held on, like she'd been practicing for exactly this moment her entire short life. Hey, he said very quietly, his voice rough at the edges in a way he wasn't going to apologize for. It's official. I've got you. He held her close. I've got you, Lily, and I'm not going anywhere. She made the sound, the one that wasn't a word yet but was aimed at him, the one Helen said was talking. He believed it now completely and without reservation because that sound had his name in it, even if it didn't have the letters yet, and he knew the difference between a noise and being spoken to, and she was speaking to him. Helen appeared in the doorway. She had a mug of something hot in each hand, and she set one on the table for him and said in her dry, unsentimental way, I assume we won. We won, Ryan said. Helen nodded once. Good. She looked at Lily. She's been fussy all morning. I think she knew something was happening. She said it the way practical people say things they half believe matter-of-factly, leaving room for it to be true. Then she went back to the kitchen. Ryan stood with Lily and felt the afternoon settle around him. The fear was gone. Not faded, gone cleanly and completely replaced by something he didn't have a precise word for, but that felt like being in the right place after a very long time of being in the wrong ones. It felt like arrival. It felt like the moment a door opens and the room on the other side is exactly the room you needed. He thought about the park, the bench, the snow. A baby he had almost walked past because the hardened surviving part of him had said, keep moving. This is not your problem. You have enough of your own. He had not kept moving. That was the whole story. The rest of it, the hearings, the lawyers, the notebook, the fear, the long nights in the rented room, the voice of his sister playing through a courtroom speaker, all of it had grown from that single choice. The choice to stop, to pick her up, to say, I've got you, to someone who could not yet say anything back. He pressed his cheek against the top of Lily's head. Your mom was going to call me, he said very quietly, just for her. The morning after the accident, she had my number written down. She was going to tell me about you. He felt his throat tighten and kept talking anyway. I didn't know. I'm sorry I didn't know sooner. But I know now, and I'm going to spend every day from here making sure you know it too. He held her a little tighter. You are not nobody's child. You are my child. You are Carter through and through, and you are never, not one single day of your life, going to be alone. Lily had both hands wrapped in his collar and her face turned into his neck, and she was warm and solid and so completely, perfectly real. 6 months after the adoption was finalized, Lily, 7 months old, sitting up on her own now, regarding the world with the focused intensity of someone with serious plans. Ryan Carter sat on the floor of the small apartment he had rented in Maplewood, watching her bat at a soft toy with the absolute concentration of a person for whom this was the most important task in the universe. The apartment was not large. It was not impressive by any standard that Marcus Hale's world would have recognized. There was a second-hand couch and a crib. Ryan had assembled himself from a flat pack box on a Saturday afternoon with a YouTube tutorial and a borrowed Allen wrench. There were drawings on the refrigerator that Deb had sent, things she was already collecting for Lily, mementos of Sarah, pieces of a history that Lily would grow into. There was a photograph on the windowsill. Sarah, 26, laughing at the camera with her whole face. Ryan had found it in a box Deb had kept from Sarah's apartment. He had framed it the day after the adoption finalized and put it where Lily could see it from the floor. When she played, he wanted her to know her mother's face. He wanted her to grow up knowing where she came from, all of it. The hard parts and the loving parts, the mistakes and the grace notes of 14 months of silence between a brother and sister who had both been too stubborn and too scared, and who had in the end found their way back to each other through the daughter one of them had left behind. Lily looked up from her toy and found Ryan's face the way she always did, the way she had been doing since the night in the snow. She looked at him with those dark, serious eyes, and then she did something new, something she had not done before. She reached toward him, both arms straight out, reaching. He leaned forward and she grabbed his face in both hands, small, warm hands, unpracticed, but certain, and she said clearly in the unambiguous voice of someone who has been working on this for a while and is finally ready to say it out loud, "Da." Just that, one syllable. His whole world. Ryan Carter, 41 years old, ex-biker, former nobody man who had spent 20 years running from everything that required him to stay, looked at the baby girl who was his, by every measure that actually mattered, felt something inside him that had been broken for a very long time, quietly, completely finished healing, and said, "Yeah, that's me. I'm right here." He had been right here every day for 7 months. He would be right here for every day that followed. And Lily Carter, Sarah's daughter, Ryan's child, nobody's child, no more would grow up knowing exactly who she belonged to and knowing that belonging was the safest thing in the world. Some families are made in hospitals in the ordinary way, in the expected sequence of things. And some families are made in the snow at midnight by a man who almost kept walking and didn't. By a choice so simple it looked like nothing from the outside stop, pick her up, stay, and turned out to be everything. Ryan Carter had stopped. He had picked her up. He had stayed. And that was the end of the story about a man who found his family in the coldest place imaginable and made sure she was never cold again.